21st April 1938, 24 January 1939. On the 12th of October 1937, Panzer Regiment 11 was raised in Sennelager under its commander Oberstleutnant Dieplinger Phillips as part of the army build-up. This was the first time since the occupation of the Rhineland by German troops that a tank regiment was stationed in Westphalia. Due to the regulations of the 4-year plan and the temporarily prevailing shortage of raw materials, the regiment's new barracks in Paderborn had not yet been completed. Thus, the regiment had to move to the Sennelager training area, which was not very suitable for the accommodation of a tank regiment due to its original design as a training area for mounted troops. Soldiers from the various regions of Germany had been transferred to Sennelager, where they formed the core of the new regiment. In Hanover, on 27th of October, the Reich Minister of War, Field Marshal Werner von Blomberg, presented the young regiment with its standards, which were then ceremonially brought into Sennelager. 4 weeks later, the first recruits, Friedrich Wilhelm Sander among them, arrived to complete their 2-year period of service. The focus of the upcoming training was to familiarize the young recruits with their weapon, the tank. At the beginning, however, there was a shortage of almost everything. Vehicles and materials were scarce, and the accommodation was inadequate, making the training of the recruits more than difficult. For the recruits, the average day began at 5:30 a.m. with early morning sports. This was followed by time for bodily hygiene, with cold water, and breakfast. At 7 a.m., the theory lessons began, given by the officers of the regiment. The soldier's oath, duties of the soldier, command and obedience, cartography, structure of the army, counter-espionage, discipline and disciplinary rules, and similar topics were covered. Then followed NCO lessons on a variety of topics such as behavior towards superiors, saluting, rank insignia, weaponry, dress code, shooting practice, equipment, first technical instructions, and the like. A short break was followed by drill, without and with Carbine 98, weapons drill, shooting practice, general infantry service, marching and cross-country exercises. This duty on the parade ground and in the camp area was only interrupted by a 90-minute lunch break and usually ended between 4 and 5 p.m. This was followed in the barracks by weapon cleaning and mending sessions, and repeated room, uniform and locker inspections, which ended between 6 and 8 p.m. After the first 5 weeks, there was training on the tank as a driver, gunner or radio operator. This hard period of basic training ended in March 1938 with the final recruit inspection. From then on, the unloved formal service and the daily harassment were replaced by regular service as Panzermänner, the training in group and platoon formations as gunners, radio operators or drivers, as signalmen, medics, supply men, or in the workshop company. Those destined to become NCOs or officer candidates received additional marksmanship lessons, tactical instruction, and general schooling in a variety of subjects. Tactical instruction was conducted by the company commanders or one of the company officers and consisted of, among other things, cartography, preparation of reports and sketches, firing from the tank on the training ground, firing on the move, fighting methods of the armoured combat vehicles, combined arms tactics, sandbox exercises, command techniques and additional terrain training. In addition, the NCO candidates received general instruction in politics, history, party affairs, racial politics and other subjects, and every week there was a 15-minute special lecture to train and consolidate personal conduct in front of comrades and superiors. In early April 1938, the regiment started to move into its new garrison in Paderborn, even though some of the construction work was still not completed, and much of the interior furnishings were not in place. At first, there was no running water, no electricity, and no heating. As the weather at that time of year was still cold, especially at night, steam locomobiles were used to power the heating in the accommodation blocks. The roads were unpaved, the vehicle hangars still missing roofs, and, because the kitchens were not yet operational, food had to be prepared in the field kitchens in the open. It would take until the beginning of 1939 for the construction work to be completed. In Paderborn, technical training increased, and driving lessons were given to as many men as possible. At the time, German military driving training was among the best and most thorough in the world, and included intensive technical and mechanical training, during which each driver learned how to repair his vehicle with the available onboard resources and without the assistance of the maintenance platoon. These were skills which would prove vital during the German Army's lightning advances in the first years of the war. Physical exercise was also increased. There were daily sessions of football, handball, athletics and swimming, while the first major field exercises and manoeuvres were conducted in the region and beyond. The first of the surviving diaries opens on 21 April 1938. 21st April 1938, Sennelager. 5 minutes ago, Unteroffizier Behler told me that we are supposed to stay here in our barracks in the Neues Waldlager until June. Since our arrival, we have already been here for over 6 months, and I guess that an additional one won't do much harm either. There is a positive side to it. 10 Pfennig more pay per day. That's the desert bonus. No, joking aside, the camp is really nice and I like it here. In the middle of the forest and the awakening nature, the roads and streets are all kept in good order. Our new barracks, however, are not completely finished yet. Not everywhere has running water and food can only be drawn from the field kitchens. I'd rather stay here in Sennelager for another month. There is not a lot to do now, so shortly after the Easter holidays. Probably because the men who are regularly based here are still on leave, and many of the recruits are being employed in the Wehrmacht Motor Racing Championship. This morning, when 3 of us were sent to the coal depot, we watched the proceedings for a while. Quite interesting. In the evening we were tasked to rearrange the rooms in the Leutnant's barracks, and while we were there, we could see the motorbikes and cars racing around the corner at the hospital building. They were all completely spattered with dirt and mud, including the drivers. Sadly, the 3 vehicles of our regiment could not participate in this particular race, as our men knew the area too well, which would have given them an advantage during the orientation drive. We all felt very sorry for them, particularly for our Feldwebel John, who, a few weeks ago, had won a silver medal. His start number, painted on white fabric, now adorns the wall of our maintenance workshop. Now, while I am writing this, I am sitting in our mess marvelling at the enormous amount of beer consumed by the grunts of IR-64. That, at least in my opinion, is the nice thing about our service branch. There is a lot less boozing. We always have to have a clear head, drivers, the crews and wireless operators. All comrades act accordingly, and only rarely does one run riot. If that happens, well, then they are probably trying to drown the same feeling which I had when I had to leave Osnabrück a couple of days ago. Even though I did drink a lot of coffee, I was still thirsty. Yes, coffee. First at home, and then, after my old father had gone back to Hamburg, in the Café Leyer, where I waited for Ruth. Ruth, with whom I would have loved to talk without being disturbed. I found a table in a corner, well separated from everyone else, and I guess that is why she did not find me when she came in. I spent half an hour waiting for her, and then, after leaving, ran into her on the way to the station, when there was just enough time for some empty words and the expression of disappointment at having missed one another in the café. Maybe the relationship is a waste of time after all, but I guess I have to wait and see. If there is one thing one learns in the army, it is patience. 2nd April 1938. Today we had a cushy number again. In the morning, Wahlberg, the little Rhinelander, and I worked in the cellars. In the evening, I had to hand over 2 rooms in Officer Barrack 11 to a lieutenant of IR 109, Ettlingen. Later in the evening, 3 of us helped the 2 pay mongrels of our Abteilung to move. One of them, Zahlmeister Moeller, is also from Osnabrück and used to be a student at our grammar school. He is a nice guy, and while packing the boxes, we talked about our time in Osnabrück. Sennelager forms the final stage of the German Army Motor Racing Championships, and it is very interesting to watch the proceedings at the start and at the finish. There are contestants from all three service branches, and it was fascinating to see all the motorbikes, cars and lorries being started at 19 Safru. A lot of people had assembled there. Several important people from the Bosch company were shuffling around between the motorbikes with boxes of spark plugs and to assist where they could. Some of them were wearing wide trench coats, and God, these light things just looked incredible, just right to swagger around in. Some comrades informed me that these men were directors of Bosch. I didn't care about that. The best thing today were those coats. I need to get one of those one day. There is sheer excitement among some of the radio operators in our room, the ones chosen to work with race control and the 2 Panzerbefehlswagen. Excitement not only about the race as such, but also about the journalists and Wochenschau reporters who flocked around the black uniforms, the 2 tanks and the fugue sets in great numbers. Unavoidable, really, that everyone was filmed, and Comrade Erich Lammers's voice was recorded on a wax record. He had to say a few words through his throat microphone, technical terms used in our trade, and the whole recording was later played by the Reichssender Cologne. Wyss was properly envious. He had been boasting about the fact that he had been photographed several times, but I guess Lammers does not begrudge him that small honour. Some news is making the rounds. According to this, all men of the Signals platoon in their second year of service are supposed to be transferred to a new regiment which is being raised in Harburg. To Harburg. That would be the ideal patch for me. But for now we are supposed to stay here in this drill ground until June. I am on leave between 3 and 8 June on Pentecost, and then 4 weeks off to Jüterbog for live firing exercises. Whatever happens, if I stay here or go to Harburg, both options will be good. 26th April 1938. Yesterday evening our 2 Gefreiter have returned from their paternal leave. Moser, with his big mouth, right in front as usual. Good Lord, the things he claims to have pulled off there. Heinlein, from Schweinfurt, immediately started to give us one of his monotonous songs. When I expressed my sadness at the fact that he hadn't unlearned any of his singing skills during his leave, he became angry, told me to shut up, and pointed out that the number of freckles in my face had increased, and that I reminded him of a crumb cake. At the moment my eyelids are so dark that it looks as if I have makeup on, just like one of those dames working on the fun fair. All due to the dust we stirred up yesterday night while shoveling coals. When we finally arrived here with our diesel and 200 kilos of coal on the back, we looked like Negroes. But in general there is just nothing to do, even less than on the construction site where I worked when I was in the RAD. On Saturday, with 5 men of the staff, we had to act as orderlies in the officers' mess, where a comradeship evening was staged for the participants of the races and several invited guests, about 650 people in total. I didn't get any tables to serve, but instead someone hung a small vendor's tray filled with cigarettes and cigars around my neck, and then I was shoved out to sell my wares in the halls of the mess. At 1 a.m. I did the till, 550 Reichsmarks in tips, but for that I had to keep my eyes open like a hawk. Several comrades had to pay losses from their own private purse after some officers had made off without paying. I enjoyed the evening. I wasn't on service, and as such I drank everything I could get my hands on: wine, beer, schnapps, champagne, liqueur, apple juice and lemonade. It was good that the kitchen missy had supplied me with a generous dinner, otherwise I might have got into trouble that night. We only arrived back at our room after 3 a.m. When we came in, we were greeted by the sight of Wyss's naked white arse glinting in the moonlight. He was deep asleep, and we. 3 roared with laughter, so loud that the whole floor was woken up. At 03:30 we went to sleep, and after only 90 minutes, badly hungover, we had to get up again for firing practice. Yes, indeed, firing practice on a Sunday. That's how it's done here in the regiment while the races are taking place during the week. The results were predictable, nothing to write home about. But back to the comradeship evening. The whole show started at 6 p.m, and the guest list included 10 army generals, 1 of the Luftwaffe, a few admirals and countless other high-ranking officers. Our regimental band in black uniforms played some swell marches, the highlight being the fanfare marches at 11 p.m. Our fanfare blowers and drummers did an amazing job and got lots of applause. There were so many big cheeses there, not only from the military, but also from the party, civilians in top industry positions, that we could more or less ignore the junior officers. A lieutenant counts for very little in that kind of company. The Bosch directors I had seen earlier were there as well. The members of the Kriegsmarine left a superb impression, snappy and in superb uniforms, a stark contrast to the wild bunch of the Luftwaffe officers there. I could not help noticing that even the highest Luftwaffe officers were quite young, and not as bent by age as some in the army. Both the mariners and the flyers sang lots of cracking songs, and when our band had played a particularly good tune, the boys of the Kriegsmarine started a perfectly timed rocket, which even included whistling. The mariners are great chaps, and they also won several of the races. 5 May 1938, Paderborn. Today, I finally have the time to make another entry into this book. I am lying in bed, watching two of our boys sweeping the room while the Volksempfänger standing on Moser's locker is thundering the beats of the Italian national anthem into the empty corridors outside. Yes, now it is May. Hitler is on a state visit to Italy, and for the last few days our broken Volksempfänger has supplied us with all kinds of reports and music from that beautiful land across the Alps, all via German radio channels, of course. And every evening, and up until deep into the night, after the Unteroffizier on duty has made his final round, we are listening to dance music. All the proper hits which are sung and whistled by each and every one of us during and after service. Our current favourite is Im Mai, da sind die Frauen nicht treu, the lyrics of which are something like, "In May the women are not faithful, then their heart often loves two or even three. Yes, one man to go out with and another one to take home. But please, that is the custom in the month of May." Radio exercises. Yes, of those we have 8 or 10 each week, and they are fantastic because they take us out into the surroundings of Paderborn. Our superiors are the best, and it is not rare for us to find ourselves doing absolutely nothing except for enjoying the sunshine, and often we come back to barracks way too late. But our superiors always brief us properly. We exercised at Cowshit village and then had an unexpected engine breakdown. Understood? And in truth we were just joyriding around in the 50-kilometre zone. Old Feldwebel Metzen, Unteroffizier Schulze, known as Little Muck, and Unteroffizier Reimer are superiors of a kind one doesn't find on every corner. One Tuesday, Ufs, Bela and us drove down to Niederrand Obermarsberg, where he visited his girlfriend Hilde. Bela is a proper adulterer. Thomas had to wear his engagement ring, on the right hand of course. How we laughed. In Obermarsberg we raced through the streets in a manner which made the locals' hair stand on end. The whole place is gloriously situated on a mountain top. The mountain itself is riddled with tunnels of an ancient copper mine. We walked into one of these tunnels but didn't get very far. Bela, currently without proper employment by the way, would love to join our platoon, and he gets on well with all of us, especially with the little muck. Later that evening, while we were having a break, the two had started fooling around, and in the course of the fighting, the little muck had thrown a full thermos flask of coffee into Bela's back, so hard that it had nearly knocked him over. After that, Bela's attempts to catch little muck were spoiled when his sciatica suddenly flared up. That made him even more angry. 6 May 1938. We have been out and about again for the entire day. In the morning we were in Weine, behind Büren, to visit Red Abteilung 5161 Wewelsburg, and we also came past the actual Wewelsburg. The drive to Weine took us through difficult terrain, and I had to navigate by map, which wasn't exactly easy to do. Metzen was driving me mad with his constant bickering. When we reached that shithole Niedern-Tudorf, I asked our driver to make a brief stop to give me the time to orient myself. That was a mistake, as now everyone started to make fun of me. Did they really teach you nothing in the SS? I replied that at least I had learned to read a map. At Vine we started our work, first local installations with tree hooks, followed by some more work underground. I had to carry the heavy carrying frame on my back. That was a slog, running after the Cubal for 4 kilometres. Along the roads I had to cover the cables up with turf slabs, and in the curves I had to tie it all up. When I finally reached the terminal station I was soaked with sweat. And all of that work had been good for nothing. Neither was anyone interested. Metzen and the little muck had already driven away to do some shopping, to make sure that none of us would starve. On the way back we drove past a female Arad camp, which is situated close to Buren, right on the top of a mountain from where one has an excellent view. Metzen ordered us to stop, and then started chatting up some of the Arad girls. As we had driven in with roaring engines, all the barrack windows were soon lined with girls who had heard the commotion we had caused. After a short while, in which Metzen realized that he wouldn't be able to score there, our wild hunt continued. We learned that the girls hardly got out of the camp as they only had arrived there in April. They could have visitors on Sundays only. That they had only arrived a month ago was well visible, as none of them had turned chubby from all the good food yet. After a difficult drive, we arrived late for lunch, but that didn't matter too much. A couple of hours later we were out again, this time driving to Bad Dreiberg. The Unteroffiziere Lange, Marx and Little Muck, as well as Feldwebel Metzen, were surprised at the number of pretty girls in the town. We drove to the water tower at the Kreuzberg, pulled off a number of hair-raising stunts with our vehicles, and then, with howling engines, thundered down a very steep and narrow winding path leading down the Kreuzberg before cutting through a quarry. At the other end there were scores of spa guests who shook their heads in disapproval. Then we drove up the Rosenberg, through the spa facilities there to the RAD camp, where I spent an hour and a half talking to old comrades. Weissert was still there, while Bohn and Schwarze, both now squad leaders, had returned from school where they had sat their final exams. Jürgens, who had recently become an uncle, was lying on his bed, lazy and disrespectful. They introduced me to the infantry reserve officer candidate who temporarily, but regularly, pleased Lisbeth Bulling last winter. A nice guy. I do hope that he enjoyed the experience. Weissert told me that the first review had gone completely awry. The ancient general responsible for training, this old man who had chalk trickling from his trouser legs, had told them that they hadn't trained their men correctly, and as a punishment there was now a curfew of 4 weeks. When we raced back through the streets of Dreiberg, I nearly soiled my pants in terror when Little Muck decided to show off his driving skills. We then stopped at a farmhouse to buy eggs. The farmer packed them all in a box, except for 2 which would not fit, and I was also the one who had to carry these 2 eggs when we arrived back at the barracks. One can expect the hooting, cheering and remarks which erupted when I climbed out of the Cubal holding the 2 eggs in my hands. 10 May 1938. I have been transferred to the regimental staff as a wireless operator. Yesterday I had to report to Lieutenant Ehrenberg. I am not sure if I like it here. It was certainly more cushy on the staff of 2 Abteilung. Last Saturday I went on leave for the weekend. What a disappointing waste of time that was. Especially so in regards to a certain young lady. When I called her, she told me that she had to go to church on Sunday. After that, we met to go on a stroll where we talked about meaningless things, and mostly at cross purposes. Damn, I should really listen to my mother. Now that I am in the army, I should stop trying to live such a solid life as if I was striving to become an Orthodox priest. It is absolute nonsense. Pull yourself together and behave, I say to myself. Don't behave like other comrades and the Unteroffizier. I have a girlfriend at home and I owe this to her. Girlfriend? More like an acquaintance, really. I can have the same kind of conversation with any other educated girl, and the worst thing is that she doesn't share my political Weltanschauung, and there is no compromise in that regard. 13 May 1938. There is little sense in me being a wireless operator, as I am always getting travel sick. Now in the regimental staff, to avoid losing a well-trained wireless operator, they have put me in a CUFZ 17 in which one is supposed not to get travel sick so easily because of the good suspension. But then they take roads which can't be described as such anymore, and I nearly puked on my wireless set. Boy, oh boy, what a race that was today. The performance of the 8-cylinder Hoch is superb. When Comrade Hursting failed to drive it properly, Lieutenant Wiltz took the wheel himself. Very quickly after that, I felt so miserable that I had to switch places with Hursting so that I could at least look out in the direction we were travelling. The wireless work as such, however, went very well. Oofs, Pola was first operator and responsible for the telegraph key, while I, as second operator, had to write, encrypt and decipher the messages. I also worked with the Zielviertafel. I had been rather nervous about all this, but it all went pretty well, even though I felt absolutely awful. 16 May 1938. Today at 20:00 you will report to your Korporalschaftsführer with a washed field cap. That was what Johnny Meyer just said to me. Johnny is the golden blonde spiece of the regimental staff, and today is a Monday typical for a little Lanza like me. It started with uniform inspection and alcohol evaporation hour, and ended with another review of all the uniform parts the spiece objected to. Yesterday I had been on leave at home, and this morning my bacon-like greasy lid drew the attention of the spiece. I have just come back from presenting the now clean cap to Unteroffizier Poli. It passed inspection, and I was allowed to walk free. There is a different wind blowing in the regimental staff. Gone are the days of, "Comrades, please make sure your uniforms are clean and in order. I will have to conduct an inspection soon." The spiece here just kicks the door open, and then it's, "Corporal, take this down." Today we have been on tank exercise off de Leith, and it didn't go particularly well, or at least not how Oofs. Pola would have wanted us to perform. But who cares what? Gefreiter Ribsam has just been here and literally forbade me to write any more in my diary. Secrecy of service-related matters and so on. I'd better stop now. 18 May 1938. Today is Wednesday, and service ended at 16:00. I am now sitting here waiting until someone in this lazy mob starts making coffee. We have some of the worst blighters here in the staff, the worst being Hursting, Behoff and Michaelis, and all of them are in our room. In the evening there was sporting exercise, a handball match, team of the signals platoon versus team of the light platoon. Our lot lost big time. Last week it was we who won the game. Later we played dodgeball, which is always lots of fun. Some of the comrades haven't played that before. I took a 3-kilo medicine ball in the face, thrown by Behoff with maximum force. That was a nice feeling. Today we filed our applications for leave on Whitsun. It all has to be done according to the book. They have pinned a sample application to the board, and we have to copy that to the letter. Later, Lieutenant Ehrenberg told me that non-swimmers will not be allowed to take leave. This seems to me an acute problem. Yesterday evening there was an extra swimming lesson in the indoor pool, but hardly anyone went in. All afraid of the cold water. At midnight there was an alarm, and we were thrown out of bed. Following that, we drove around in the KFZ 17 until 4:00, when we had to send a number of messages. All went well, and at 04:15 we assembled at Benhausen for debriefing. 21 May 1938. Saturday today. Much running around yesterday and today, cleaning the rooms, locker and room inspection. It is great fun. The whole company is tackling the stairs and hallways, and then starts cleaning while everyone is singing or whistling. Often we clean to the tunes of the Badonviller March or to the song Schön ist's bei den Soldaten. And to be honest, cleaning in this manner is great fun. Would make a nice scene in a movie when 6 whistling men in a line are rhythmically brushing the cleaning water over the floor. Now everything is clean and shiny. The kind of military cleanliness I always envisaged before I joined up. The chairs are brilliantly white as the flowers on the many apple trees which are growing around the barrack buildings. Not a single grain of dust remained. The floor is just as clean as the polished surface of our table. And the lockers, a dream. Gefreiter Rubsam has decorated his handkerchiefs and laundry with colourful silk bands. Fitzer copied him and did the same in his locker. Even Behoff and Hörsting were working on their lockers, as if the lieutenant himself would do the inspection. We stood in front of our lockers for about 30 minutes before the Spieß and 5 Unteroffiziere came in. At that moment there were only 3 of us in the room. Rubsam was with the Oberst, Makowski was with Oberleutnant Tolke, and Michaelis with Egon, all of them as batmen. As I am the new guy in the staff company, the Spieß took extra time to inspect my locker, and a lot depended on the outcome of this inspection. I was happy when the Spieß nodded at his Unteroffizier and said, "Good." Then he took a look at my trousers, the tunics and coat, but again couldn't find anything to complain about. Then he inspected Hörsting's locker. There were no major problems with it, but there were enough small details to catch the eye of an Oberfeldwebel like Meyer, who thundered, "Damn you, man, this is nothing to brag about, needs to be done again," before he and his entourage left the room without a further word. 1st June 1938. I am on guard duty for the first time since joining up, block guard at the regimental staff. At least that gives me time to write. Tomorrow we are going on leave. I already have my ticket, and I hope I'm getting out of here early enough. Leave ends on the 8th, and we have already received our subsistence allowance. That's always nice. At the staff of Turkai battalion we only got 495 RM. Now they want me to pay 15 RM for a pair of headphones which were stolen from me while I was serving with them in the Altes Waldlager. Either this or I have to organise a new pair from the regimental staff. 15 Reichsmark and upcoming leave, damn it, I will have to organise a replacement. This morning we did a forest run, 5 kilometres, garrison competition. A cycle squadron of the 15. Reiter Regiment has won the whole thing. Second place, 7th Company, Panzer Regiment 11. I had to take part in the Staff 2 team. I was always in the leading group, even though I had promised myself not to put any effort into the whole thing. But after the start signal, it somehow felt stupid to crawl forward at the rear, so I started to work my way towards the front. The route was quite a nice one, always shaded by trees, past the enormous fish ponds at Neuhaus, start and finish at the Schützenhaus, where there is dancing every Sunday. Maidservants' ball, of particular interest to us soldiers, and in the immediate vicinity lots of forest, with paths and benches, loads of benches. Most practical, says Vollberg. But that aside, the Schützenhaus is really quite nice. And why should one spend every Sunday in the cinema, when one can be out there in beautiful nature? In the previous days, we did a lot of outdoor exercises. On Friday, we were out all day, and at the end, having worn the headphones for hours, I had the worst of headaches. I acted as the second wireless operator in Egon's KFZ-17. Egon had been in a terrible mood, and we raced through the countryside like devils. The speedometer mostly showed 80, often between 95 and 100 km/h, and that even though he had in the past ordered Hörsting and Michaelis not to drive faster than 55 km/h after the signals squadron had wrecked their KFZ-15-1 during a wild race. There is not a single working radio vehicle in the regimental staff anymore. They have all been wrecked, so they have to do lots of work on foot, hauling 3 kilometres of heavy telephone cable down to Benhausen, then installing the line, running through their exercises before packing up and arriving back in barracks completely exhausted. One has to give it to them, they have learned to march long distances, and we could see that during today's forest run. On Monday we were out of bed by 4 a.m. Company exercises, cooperation between the light platoon and signals platoon and messenger platoon. That was quite interesting. I was in the KFZ-17 of the messenger platoon. The exercise area stretched from Dahl, Dringenberg, Schmechten to Gut-Dannhausen near Bad Dreiberg. Wild driving back and forth. Our platoon was acting as armoured enemy, and the signalmen had to engage in combat with their carbines and smoke bombs. We also had some gas in a bottle. With all the shooting, we really enjoyed the day. At the end, we all assembled at Leur's farm near Danhausen. I helped with the harvest on that farm while I was in the RAD in 1937. Herr Leur and his wife were very happy when I greeted them, and Frau Leur at once supplied me with one of her giant ham sandwiches, which I shared with Ufs, Reuter of the motorcycle squadron. The Leurs also gave me a huge bunch of lilac to decorate our rooms with. The sandwich tasted heavenly, but then everyone in the camp knew of Frau Leur and her cooking skills. As we drove through Dreiberg, I peered through the windows of the car to see whether I could spot some old acquaintances, but there was no one I knew around. Unteroffizier Pohler promised us that we'd come back to Bad Dreiberg after Pentecost. I hope we do. Yes, tomorrow I am going on leave. More of the usual, I guess. A wave of worries and concerns which only the civilian has, and then, after a few days of boredom, one can't wait to get back into the army. One should really get a woman and get married. That way there would at least be someone who is truly happy when one comes home on leave. And at least then there would be someone to pass the time with easily. Otherwise that all depends on luck and the amount of cash in one's pocket. I don't like the idea of running around with a whole bunch of girls on each arm like some of the comrades do, or like that tango boy Vigier. By the way, I met in front of the Weymouth on Saturday night, talking to Eisenhofen and Glaser. The whole lot of them, including Förlkruger and Arntz, had been inside and had not behaved very well. That had resulted in a threat by an Unteroffizier of the 15, Reiter Regiment, who had told them to get lost immediately. Vigier was boiling with anger that it had come to this. This is his one positive side. He hardly drinks anything and so never loses control and misbehaves. To come back to the looming days of leave, I am wondering if I will be seeing my true love, the one who keeps doing my head in, or if I will somehow find another little lady to attach myself to. Maybe I will run into an old acquaintance, but I already know that this period of leave will pan out just like all the others did. A young soldier like me should be out having a fling with somebody. The comrades with whom I share a room already think I am an old buffer. Well, maybe I am just that, just like Chico in the American film Seventh Heaven. That, by the way, was a really good film, even though most of the guys in our room didn't understand it properly. Damnation. There are several bleeding cockchafer beetles and some fat moths which are distracting me from writing. Earlier on, I collected the cockchafers and placed them on Schwegmann's face. But even when 3 of the beasts crawled around on his mug, it did not wake him up. Schwegmann is on guard duty with me and is snoring on one of the beds here in the guard room. As is Tigerman, who is occupying the second bed and is snoring so loud that the walls are shaking. I should ram one of those beetles down his throat. That would stop his snoring. Well, if he isn't of a similar disposition to Jürgen Rothert, the guy who eats cockchafers if you buy him a glass of beer. One has to have iron nerves to cope with all this. Cockchafers, moths, snoring comrades. 2nd June 1938. 3/4 of our training period are now over, and I am on the way to become just as stupid and stubborn as Petermann. Petermann's real name is Peter Schürmann, and he has been transferred here from Nachrichtenabteilung 16. They say his parents must have conceived him while they were drunk. But good grief, that guy even looks stupid. Sticky out ears, a huge snout under a narrow brow, little eyes like a pig, a hint of a hump on his back and unnaturally long arms. And that imbecile is now serving as a radio operator and is driving everyone insane with his complete lack of orthography. Just one example. He spells the nice name of Bad Dreiberg as Batterienberg, page torn out. I might not have been happy when my leave came to an end, but I surely wasn't very sad either. After the first exercise, it was as if I had never left. On Saturday after Pentecost, I went to Bad Dreiberg in my black uniform. The thermal baths there are really nice. We'll go there more often. On the following Sunday, the regiment formally marched into Paderborn. Quite a show that was. Seemingly the entire population was out on the streets to see our parade. I marched on foot. All the vehicles were crewed by officers and NCOs. Then, in the evening, a regimental ball in the Schützenhaus. Many girls there too, but none were quite right for me. I sat with a group of former grammar school friends, Jupp Wellinghoff, Fritz Berg, and Lieutenant Adolf von Knoblauch of RR 15. All the men were supposed to be back in the barracks by 3 a.m., but 162 men failed to do so and came much later. Wasn't punished severely. Service on Monday wasn't too bad. Schuknecht and I worked inside the 2-cm tank. On Thursday I went to Bad Dreiberg again, where for the first time since I left the Rad, I met the 2 spring mermaids Paula and Lisbeth again. The spa guests made big eyes when they saw how cheerfully Lisbeth greeted me. In the evening I met the sisters, Ellie and Thea Turner, with whom I used to go walking in Kreuzberg. I had intended to have lunch with the Abteilung, but I was too late for that and went into Café Burger instead. In the evening, after having spent my last pfennig, I ran into Ellie and Thea again, who were going dancing in Café Stute. They really wanted me to go with them, so in the end I did accept their invitation, and we had a nice chat with one another until at 10 p.m. it was time for me to go back to Paderborn. Lisbeth accompanied me to the Stellberg, and then I raced back on my bicycle, which I had brought with me from leave. I also brought my blue bathrobe. Both will come in handy. Last Sunday I was in Osnabrück, same proceedings as always. Herbert had gone to Bielefeld to attend some SS event, so I decided to go swimming. I only needed to catch the train at 9:16 p.m., so I had the evening for myself. On Monday, the whole unit drove to the Sauerland for a large manoeuvre exercise. I was astounded when I saw the large number of radio vehicles in the individual units assembled there, down to and around the Münnersee Lake. It all went well, even with several small defects in our Kfz-17, and not only that, the team Sander Ernsting received special praise when it was all over. It all ended with a terrain exercise near Wellinghausen. I had been there before, staying in the local youth hostel during the 900-year anniversary of the town, and a certain young lady stayed there too, during her time in grammar school. She had met a young soldier there, and she spoke about him very often. Maybe time to write a card to Ruth? In the Pullmanskrug it was too expensive, and I could only afford 2 glasses of milk. In the evening we drove to the beautiful Mönnersee and then back through the Sauerland to Paderborn, where we arrived at 9 p.m. And how nice when we saw the service schedule for the following day, technical service in the morning, and then to Bad Lipspring for a swim. How nice a soldier's life can be, even if not every day. 15th of July, 1938, Paderborn. God damn it, my fountain pen is broken and I can't buy a new one. I am constantly broke. It's been like that for weeks. I already had to borrow 2 marks from Michaelis to be able to get my bicycle repaired. The frame had broken and needed to be welded. I am still not sure how long I should stay in the army. Time is passing too quickly, and suddenly one has turned old without noticing it. Last Sunday I was at home and everything was unchanged. Mother has hardly enough to live on, so there isn't enough for me to eat, not even thinking about taking a food parcel with me when I leave. Father is living quite well in Hamburg, has a car, and every day he smokes cigarettes worth at least 1 mark, and I can't even go on holiday properly. Herbert intends to visit the old man in Hamburg, so yesterday I sent him my suitcase. His suitcase is broken, and I hope he brings my leather case from Hamburg. It will be quite useful here. At the moment we are in driving school where we are learning to drive a lorry. 2nd week already, and it is great fun. We 6 students are being taught by Feldwebel Flaxbarth, the maintenance sergeant. We are all making good progress, Hüttgen, who already has a driving license for tanks in particular. Then there are Unteroffizier Morawski, Klusner, Schwegmann and Growler of the motorcycle squadron. The latter 3 have big mouths, but are all incredibly stupid. I am performing best, however, as I have already driven a car before I joined the military, and I also already have the tank driving license. With the driving school we get around a lot. On one morning, in heavy rain, we drove to Horn, where we had a coffee in a small guest house. In the nice hotel next to it, there was a pretty blonde girl standing in a window, and she joked around with us a little. When we drove away, I noticed that she kept waving after us for a long time. I should really make an effort to get back to Horn to get to know her better, or get to know her at all. I really liked her a lot. 31. October 1938, Paderborn. Yes, since 15th of July, a lot of water has gone down the Rhine. Between passing my driving test and our mobilization alarm, Rupsemann didn't allow me to get my diary out, and it ended up in my home storage, where it remained until now. Rupsemann, the vile swine, is now an Unteroffizier, and I am still a lowly panzer gunner. When he walks past, I have to snap my heels together, but that isn't happening often anymore. Since the Sudeten campaign, I have been transferred back to the staff of the Sakai, Abteilung. Today I am manning the regimental switchboard in the garrison. I have often done so in the field, in the Sudetenland, and all the exercises and on manoeuvre, but this is the first time I am doing it on a stationary set. It is a bit more complicated outside, where one has to operate in barns and old sheds, but the amount of work here is much higher. There is a literal wire entanglement spanning across the two boxes in front of my face. But now, at 21:00, it is getting quieter, which gives me time to write. Wrote a card to Mother to tell her why I didn't come to visit on Sunday, and sent another letter to Herbert. Maybe another to Kurt Schwartz. I could tell him that I might be able to see him in Schweinfurt in a week or so. But that is still not certain, so it is better to save the paper. Could write to a certain young lady in Osnabrück, but she can wait. She left me waiting until she finally sent me a more or less proper photograph of her, and now I can wait until my next period of leave, until I get another one from her as a kind of souvenir. It has to be said that she now has at least half a dozen photographs of me. But that doesn't matter. More importantly, I might soon be a reserve officer candidate. That will be important for my future. What my chances are, I don't know. Today is the date on which the Abteilung will pass the names of the candidates on. Whether I have been picked, I don't know. On 3rd November, the promotions will be made public, and from a semi-official side, someone has already drawn a chevron on my sleeve with a finger. A comrade just walked by singing the song we have composed, Dream of the Sudeten, of Czechoslovakia, dream of Mr. Benesch and his bunch of criminals, dream of beers in Pilsen and of beautiful women in Prague. With you I want to dream of the Moldau tonight. The engine hums its unchanging tune. The tanks are rolling into Czechoslovakia. When Hitler's colours fly above this gau, a tank gunner returns to his little Frau. The engine hums its unchanging tune. The tanks are rolling into Czechoslovakia. We composed several songs like this when we were in Czechoslovakia, including a particularly good and juicy one about the driver of an old Krupp tank. 1st November 1938. Will we finally get promoted, or won't we? The answer to this question is keeping us all awake. I was transferred into the recruit instructor's course yesterday. That's at least something, but I still wonder when I will know more about Reserve Officer Sander. In the army, one needs to be patient and have nerves like a rocking horse. This will probably be the last time that I will be sitting at the switchboard. It is interesting to see that now, after office hours, all the cheap soldiers' brides are calling, from Lipspringer, Geseke, Senne, from all parts of the world, and of course from Paderborn in particular. A little calculation just for the sake of it. The citizens of Paderborn are no great friends of us soldiers. But what would the miserable gits say if the army moved out of Paderborn and no one paid the citizen tax any more? An Unteroffizier in his 3rd year of service, first year as an Unteroffizier, pays a monthly amount of 250 RM as citizen tax, a total of 30 RM per year. We have 8 companies and 3 staff with 20 Unteroffiziere in each. At the lowest count, that adds up to 6,600 RM in tax, and that doesn't include all the officials, employees and workers. Officers are paying a lot more than that. The people in Paderborn would do better to shut up. Mother has sent me a parcel today. Included my laundry, half a loaf of white and half a loaf of black bread. The white I have already eaten. No money, no other choice now but to pay for the required pair of dress trousers myself. Can only do so in installments. I have already paid 10 RM and it is supposed to cost 42 RM, and I still need to pay for my dancing lessons. I won't be getting anywhere in life that way. 7th November 1938. So much for my training course. I am so sick of all the drills in the second year of service. But anyway, I am now a reserve officer candidate and will have to tolerate all this for a few more days. I was really lucky. I am a reserve officer candidate and recruit instructor. The promotion to Gefreiter should come through in a few days, and with it the pay backdated to 1st October. Money will probably be here on Thursday, the day on which our course will be inspected. On the 10th, the Studious is supposed to do an inspection, and Oberleutnant Streger, our course commander, has promised us a few days of leave, but that still needs to be confirmed by the commander. I hope it works out. I hope to get back to Osnabrück soon. Damn, since I saw Ruth again a few weeks ago, I can't get her out of my head. To be frank, I am a real idiot for not being able to finish with her. I have known her for 5 years now, and nothing has changed since then, far too long. But now an end to these thoughts. In the next 2 or 3 years, I will have to look at girls only from a distance, and I also need to learn to dance first. The relatively quiet winter half-year here in Paderborn would have been ideal for that, if I hadn't been turned into a recruit instructor. Funny, only a week ago I was so unhappy I could have died, because without an Abitur there seemed to be no chance to become a reserve officer. And now that the whole thing has been sorted and I have passed all the questions, I couldn't care less. 10th November 1938. Today is Thursday, a very busy one. Today we have received our promotions, and I am now a Gefreiter and recruit instructor. I guess there will be a bit of waiting required before the official appointment to officer candidate comes through. Today our instructor's course was inspected by Herr Major Kohl. The inspection went well, as expected, and in return we did receive a few days of leave. I am allowed to go home tomorrow, and I only need to return on Wednesday before the arrival of the new recruits. A huge surprise. In addition, all reserve officer candidates had to present themselves to the regimental commander Diplopor Ingers Oberst Phillips today. We were presented by our Fähnrichsvater Lieutenant Schmidt. Let me characterize him quickly. A pair of spotless boots, a pair of 80-horsepower trousers, but a remarkable pair of romance novel legs, meaning that at first it looks as if they will not get together, but then they get together in the end, like in a romance novel. He has a wasp waist and shoulders like Max Schmeling, a huge mouth. He roared at us like a bull, told us that we couldn't even dress ourselves properly. He called us wimps who didn't know how to behave. But when the Oberst came to review us, he became as meek as a kitten. All this reviewing is quite tiring, but then the only reason, as we all know, is to find out if the worker's scent is still clinging to us, or if we have been born for a higher purpose. After the inspection, my essay about education was handed back to me. Lieutenant Engelhardt of 5th Company had already talked all the essays through with us during the previous lesson, and had made a point of saying that mine was the only useful one. Not bad for someone without Abitur. Today I have polished the floors of my room. I want to make a good first impression when the new recruits arrive on Wednesday and Thursday. From the halls outside, I can hear the laughter of all the former panzer gunners who are now Gefreiter. They suddenly all feel powerful. I am not with them because Germuth, the new Unteroffizier, or Gugi, as we call him, had come up the stairs, and in the dark I had failed to recognize and greet him. But let him. I'll soon be an Unteroffizier myself. 24th November 1938. 14 days have passed, and they have been quite memorable. Last week I was at home from Friday evening to Wednesday morning. Spent most of the time in bed with a terrible cold, stomach pain, headache, fever. Wasn't nice. But there wasn't anything for me to do anyway. I have to learn how to dance, otherwise I really don't know what to do with my spare time instead of going to the cinema, and most films I have already seen in Paderborn. My recruits arrived on Thursday evening. 4 young flowers, 2 men from Cologne on the Rhine, 1 from Wuppertal, and 1 man from Halle in Westphalia. One has to know how to approach these Rhinelanders to make something useful out of them. I am far too serious for their club. And I already received the first rollicking for my 4 recruits. The gits had gone on exercise without their neck stocks, and in addition 2 of them hadn't shaved properly, and only because I had been unable to keep my eyes on them because I had been Gefreiter on duty. As a result, I am now not allowed to ask for leave on Sunday. We are really getting it from all sides. Damn, how have they drilled us in the first days? Everything we did was wrong. They let us stand in the rain and cold for hours in full view of our recruits, who see us in that unimpressive state. No wonder when one is freezing to death, not much we could have done. At least the lunch tastes a lot better after such torture. I am also proud to announce that Ruth Wieman has finally supplied me with a proper photograph of her. I have met her several times. That is all I can say about this matter. I have. Also met with Annalisa and her sister. Annie has grown massively in width and is determined to marry a guy who serves in the Oldenburg RAD. I wish her all the best. My 4 men are doing quite well, really, and their demeanour towards me is acceptable. While I was away yesterday, Gugi snowed in to inspect the lockers of 2 of my men. He found faults in both of them. I have personally inspected each locker on a daily basis, so it can't have been that bad, but I know what Gugi is like. I have my own experiences with him. Well, anyway, my men don't worry too much about it, least of all Rice, the fat footballer from Wuppertal. They are all making an effort and are pulling their weight, so I will not discipline them any further. 25th of November 1938. Today we got a rollicking during drill exercises. First time the recruits were wearing steel helmets. With that iron pot on their heads, they found it hard to sing properly. Resulted in a few extra hours of drill. I am feeling a bit sorry for the chaps, and in all honesty, there are some who were drilled and pushed much harder than that, men like Goldhorn and Arntz, for example, and they have turned into bad soldiers anyway. Yesterday I showed my 4 heroes what a proper locker inspection in the army looks like. In fact, only Rice's locker wasn't entirely in order, the others were looking quite tidy. But then, just to make sure they'll put even more effort in the next time around, I whirled the contents of all of the lockers around and threw half of it on the floor. To be honest, I am not enjoying my new role at all. In the past, the days just flew past, and now one is standing on the parade ground shouting at the men, while at the same time one is being shouted at by one's superiors. Time hardly passes that way. All the joy I felt only a year ago after joining the army has been blown away. Damn, and when I look at the photo of Ruth, I can't help thinking that this is over already. If only I had a woman on my side, someone who could give me some stability. Otherwise, I only have Mother and Herbert, and I don't care too much about either of them. I have no idea yet what to do later, who I will work for and what to do. I have, to say it bluntly, no goal in life, and that is a nasty attitude. I used to make a great effort to become an officer candidate, and during my time in the RAD did everything to become a troop leader. But here at home, or privately, I have no motivation, and even the prospect of becoming a Feldwebel doesn't do it any more, since I realized the number of disadvantages connected to that role. Later I am supposed to take over my father's shop, but I can't be bothered about that. Yes, what am I to do? At the moment I am clinging to the thought that my recruits will soon be ready to be left to their own devices without constant supervision. That will allow me to go into town again whenever I want, and how difficult can it be to find a fairly attractive girlfriend? But, on the other hand, I have no real interest in that either. I can't explain it. Change of subject. A few weeks ago I ordered a pair of dress trousers from a tailor, but damn, when I collected them recently, they didn't fit properly. Lots of creases around the zip at the front and not. Fitting properly at the side of the legs. God, I am angry. Used my meagre pay to buy these trousers, and then they don't fit. The fabric is rubbish as well. A lesson for the future. Not the first time I have experienced what it means if one has clothing made by a cheap tailor. In the end, it's never worth it, and fabric and cut will never look classy. That will the last time I fall into that trap. Have been listening in the lecture hall today. A catastrophe. All the craftsmen and labourers who can't even write properly in normal circumstances were breaking their fingers during the speed writing exercises.